Welcome back. In this video, I'm reacting to what Felix recently said about the whole $1 trillion debate for Palantir stock. In his video, I thought it was very well done. He was referring to my stance and what Tom Nash has said previously with this really well done two-variable data table, which you'll see quite often in finance, sensitivity table between two different variables. In this case, he used price to sales, which is just a multiple on Palantir's top line revenue and 10-year revenue growth rate. So this is his proxy for finding the valuation of Palantir stock in 10 years. So I'm going to give you my quick thoughts on this right now, but first I want to say the whole $1 trillion debate in the video that I made was based on Palantir being a $1 trillion company by 2030, which I believe is Tom Nash's perspective. And that's what I was saying is not in the cards for Palantir. Of course, only my opinion. You're going to find different conclusions, but I do think 1 trillion is much more likely when we talk 2035 to 2040. No one's going to get it exactly right, but if you ask my perspective, that's what it is. So with that said, let's analyze together this table, because I think there's a lot of insight in it. So first of all, $1 trillion is equivalent to $380 per share. Felix assumes 2% dilution, which I think is more or less accurate. Not really sure what else I would put there, because we know they're going to continue to dilute until they're able to buy back shares at a significant quantity. So I think 2% is pretty conservative. And future shares of 2.6 billion. I think that's roughly fine. It's not going to affect things too much. As for price to sales, this is essentially the multiple the market is willing to pay for the company at the point in time. So we consider Palantir 10 years from now, 2034, what is the market going to be willing to pay? Well, I really think it's going to be willing to pay a lot more than 4, 6, 8, even 10, probably a lot less than 38 times. Why do I say less than 38 times? Well, this is Palantir's trailing price to sales ratio. Right now it's about 24, and the forward next 12 months price to sales is 19. So do I see this being 38 or anywhere above 30? Really not at all. You look at what it peaked at previously, it was like 65, but that's really completely unreasonable at this point. And you've seen how hard Palantir's had to work to go from $6 to back above 20. It's definitely not impossible for Palantir to once again trade above 30 times sales, but what I'm saying is that can happen. It's just not going to happen 10 years from now when the company is significantly larger and it's much more mature than it is right now. So that's what you have to think about. So from that point of view, I'm actually going to cross off the 38, and we're just going to deal with what is left. So in terms of revenue growth rates, I think this is very interesting because we know Palantir is basically right here in terms of growth. So the question is, are they going to fall off or are they going to be able to accelerate growth? Well, I think you know my answer. My answer is they're at least going to maintain, if not accelerate, their growth rates. So I think 23% revenue growth is a good baseline. Up to 43, that would definitely be more difficult in my opinion. Every single year, 43%. If you look at what analysts are expecting, they're expecting $4.6 billion in 2028 off of that $1 billion in 2020. That's an overall growth rate of about 20%. So can Palantir double that growth rate? Sure, it's possible. And I think they might grow closer to 40% for some of those years, but definitely not all of them and definitely not on average. It's just my intuition. But let's say if they did, what would that look like? Well, I think you can certainly rule out 4 times sales as well as 6 times sales, 8 times sales, and 10 times sales. If they're growing that fast, they're going to be worth a heck of a lot more. So how do you get to that 1 trillion? Well, you would be north of $300 if they do grow at 43% every year for the next 10 years. And if the market values them at 10 times sales, I think, yeah, that's how you get to 1 trillion. But again, that's not by 2030. That's over the next 10 years. That's 2034. So I end up landing somewhere close to what Felix ended up saying.
You are in the extreme corner on the right. That's the bullish corner. And then you also have the extreme bearish corner on the left. And the realist, the sort of not completely bonkers, drank too much Alex Karp juice in the morning, is probably more somewhere in the middle here. So somewhere in this glorious middle is more likely where the stock's going to end up because it's just more probable. It's more probable that companies do well, but not exceedingly well. And it's also more likely they do well than they're completely implode, at least when they're at this level of profitability and so on. So I would say we are more likely to end up in the 60s, 70s, maybe $100, maybe $120 than at the $380 anytime soon. So what side am I on? I guess I'm kind of more with Jackson on this, to be honest with you. And it's nice to run these things through. And I did a video to walk you through the real data again on this. But you got to separate the dream bull scenario from what would I be happy and content with. You've got to invest in a stock with a happy and content, more realistic outcome, and then let it surprise you when it does more. But don't go into it with like, I have to reach $300, $500, $600 on the share price, because you're going to hold on to it beyond the optimum.
In his video, which I recommend watching, is that Palantir is probably going to grow 25 to 30% per year for the next 10 years, which is remarkable growth. You think about how difficult that is. And it's probably going to be worth 15 times sales, somewhere around there. So it's definitely going to be in the $100 stock range. The question is, could it be higher than that? I do think it could be higher than $100. I just think the delta between $100 and $300 is pretty significant. So just going off this chart, I would say maybe there leaves a little to be desired given the difference between 27 and 43. I would probably put another column here where Palantir is worth closer to $200 in the middle, and that's probably where I would say. In the next 10 years, you could probably see a $250 price target on the high end and a $150 price target on the low end within the next 10 years. But beyond that, I think that's where things really get crazy. But I'm all about setting expectations and making them realistic. And I, once again, will say it again, I do not think $1 trillion in the next 6 to 7 years is realistic for Palantir. I don't think it's going to 20x. I'm a big Palantir fan, as all of you know, but I don't think it is realistic, nor do I think it is reasonable for us with Palantir channels to be saying that is a reasonable prospect. You have to look at the hard numbers. Does it make sense? No, not really. You would have to see the highest growth in the company's history for the longest period of time in the company's history. And is that realistic to happen? No, it is not. But over a longer period of time, maybe double that horizon, I do think it is a likelihood based on all of my research. So I would love to know what you think in the comments, and hopefully I'll be talking to Felix soon and we will be doing a debate on the subject and many other things. Felix has been a guest on the channel a few times in the past. I really value his work, and I think he brings a very objective analysis to the situation that is Palantir, that is really all over the place and very complicated, and at the same time can be made so simple with a really well done data table like this one. So with that said, love to know your thoughts on his work. Until next time.